All right, everybody. So we can go ahead and get started, and we'll keep allowing people to come in as they do. Hi, everybody. My name is Gwen Weisinger. I'm one of the youth climate activists with Sunrise Worcester. And we are so glad that you chose to spend an hour of your Earth Day with us. This is our first event of our Earth Day Live series, and we'll have more events or more updates about upcoming events at the close of this hour. But before we hopped into our presentation, we wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the fact of the challenging times that we're facing. So amidst a global pandemic where many of us are balancing complex feelings and circumstances, you all made the time to learn about our climate crisis and how you can be a part of the environmental movement. And this work matters, and we're really grateful for you for being here. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Great. So we are also aware that a lot of people are not able to engage in climate activism in this moment because of various types of hardship. And so we know that while we are working on combating climate change, it's also important for us to take care of our community members. So we put some information about different ways that you could donate. If you are local to Worcester, you could consider donating to Mutual Aid Worcester, which is started as a Facebook group where people can indicate if they are in need. People can volunteer to help those in need. And the way to donate them is through Venmo at Mutual Aid Worcester. Or you could consider donating to the Mass Redistribution Fund, which has brought together a coalition of about 10 different grassroots organizations that are focused on helping Massachusetts' most vulnerable population. So if you would consider donating to those during this time, that would be wonderful. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a moment. Great. So today's theme focuses on striking and storytelling, and we've chosen presenters who inspire us to demand environmental change through their personal journeys, fighting for environmental justice. So we're grateful today to be joined by Indigenous and allied land and water protectors discussing the environmental and human impacts of megadams. At this time, I'm going to pass the presentation over to Meg Sheehan, who is the campaign coordinator with the North American Megadam Resistance Alliance, and is an environmental attorney based out of New England, who will be giving an interview of the negative impacts of Megadam hydropower being promoted as green energy, and who will be helping introduce our storytellers and our activists for today. So thank you, Meg.
Thank you, Gwen and Sunrise Movement, for having us on this live stream. And thank you to all our presenters. I'm just so honored to have each of you join us, and thank you for that acknowledgement of the difficult times that we were in. And I think that the story of megadams is really emblematic of the way we all need to come together to take care of our planet and each other. So for today, we have a wonderful short 5-minute film to unveil that was put together by one of our allies at Standing Bear Network, John Gonzalez, who I believe is listening in. But we're really excited to share this with you, and it's going to set the frame for our discussion today. So if we could turn to that film and play that, that would be terrific.
April 22nd is the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, when millions of people come together in rallies across the United States to take action for our planet. 30 years ago was the day when Indigenous people from Cree and Inuit territory in Quebec came to demand that New York cancel its contract to buy more hydropower from traditional Indigenous lands in Canada. Hydropower that would be delivered over 1,000 miles from the remote subarctic regions of James Bay.
Whereas this dream has become a nightmare for us. It's destroyed our spawning grounds, it's destroyed the nesting grounds, it's displaced and relocated our people, and broke the social fabric of our communities.
Indigenous people have lived off these lands since time immemorial. New dams on the Great Whale River threatened to further destroy forests, rivers, and traditional ways of life. In early 1990, Inuit and Cree built a hybrid kayak canoe called the Odiak, traveling from the Great Whale River, meeting conservation groups and citizens at every town along the way. Over land and water, they traveled to their final destination, Times Square, New York City, where they would take part in a massive Earth Day celebration. The Cree and Inuit joined with U.S. allies to file the legal challenges of its export contracts between New York and Hydro-Quebec. As a result of their heroic efforts, Governor Mario Cuomo canceled the contracts, and victory against the Great Whale Megadam project was won. But the victory was short-lived. Years later, in 2002 and 2009, Hydro-Quebec returned, destroying the Rupert River, diverting it for the La Grande Hydro Project. Today in 2020, Hydro-Quebec is back, promoting its hydropower as clean and green, a solution to the global climate crisis. This is a greenwashing. Megadams are dirty energy and should be treated like fossil fuels. They destroy rivers and carbon-sequestering forests. They flood traditional lands, causing erosion and methylmercury poisoning, the displacement of Indigenous people, and the destruction of their traditional way of life. Hydro-Quebec, Manitoba Hydro, and other government-owned Canadian monopolies continue to contribute to the cultural genocide of Indigenous people, while U.S. consumers of that hydropower become complicit. We beat Hydro-Quebec then, and we need to beat them now. Since 1990, 5 more megadams have been built in eastern Canada by Hydro-Quebec and Nalcor Energy, Muskrat Falls in Labrador, 4 massive megadams on the Romaine River off of the north shore of the St. Lawrence River, with more megadams planned to export hydro to the United States. Massachusetts has signed a contract with Hydro-Quebec to import 1,200 megawatts to Boston through Maine via the so-called New England Clean Energy Connect, a project of the international conglomerate Iberdrola and Central Maine Power. Across Canada, in Pemichikimek territory, Manitoba Hydro is building a massive kiosk dam for export to Minnesota. Greenwashing destructive megadams while exploiting the environment and people under the false claim of clean, green energy. Quebec's Premier Legault wants to dam more rivers, making Quebec the battery of North America. Across Canada, the story is the same. Dam rivers to produce hydropower for export to U.S. cities such as Boston and New York, and Minneapolis and St. Paul. Large dams are in fact dirty energy. It is an economic and environmental disaster. Protecting and restoring rivers should be part of every country's climate action plan. Get involved. Join the effort to reject Canadian hydropower. Keep hydro out of the Green New Deal and out of your state, city, or town for climate action. Help us stop the corridors. Join the fight in Maine against CMP's corridor, and tell Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio in New York City to cancel CHPE.
Well, thank you for taking the time to watch that. It wasn't streaming very well on my end, but it is on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. That's on our North American Megadam Resistance. And please share and spread the word. And we'll hear more about that story from Matthew in a few minutes. So I just want to say that Massachusetts really took a wrong turn for the climate when it contracted with Hydro-Quebec in 2018 to import the 1,200 megawatts of hydropower from remote areas in Canada, calling it clean energy. And I do have my first slide with the map.
Yep.
I think maybe I just wanted to give a sense of the scale of what we are talking about with these megadams and the corridors to the US. A lot of times when we talk about the impacts, we're just looking at the impacts of the actual corridors themselves from the Canadian border down to the various cities. But when we look up to, on the right part of the screen, Muskrat Falls, Lower Churchill project on the Mississippi River, which is where Amy Norman is, one of our speakers today. You can see that's several thousand miles, if I'm correct, to Boston, or at least 1,000. And then we have Elder Nukash up in Wamagoostii First Nation up here, one of the more northernmost Cree communities in Canada. So these are subarctic regions, and this is not local renewable energy. And I think even in this pandemic crisis right now, it highlights the need for us to be local and have control over our own food supplies and our own energy supplies. And this megadam hydro from these remote areas in subarctic Canada is the complete antithesis of that. So Massachusetts, when it signed this contract in 2018, really ignored the longstanding cumulative human and environmental impacts of Canadian megadams. And as the movie indicated, we are complicit when we flip on our lights and use some of this hydropower, which we're already getting. And the plan is to bring in more and to build more megadams. Dams displace people from their land and their homes. Vast areas are flooded by reservoirs. Globally, over 80 million people have been displaced by hydropower. And this has happened all across Canada. The film highlighted the megadams in Pimicikamak territory. There's a big new dam being built in Western Canada as well. So Hydro-Quebec itself in Quebec province now has over 60 massive megadam hydro projects, and more are being built in Canada and Labrador. Only 1/3 of the world's longest rivers remain free flowing, and some of those in Canada are slated for these megadams. The second point I want to make, in addition to the environmental and human devastation caused by these dams, is the climate impacts. So dams cause significant adverse impacts to the flow, function, and ecology of boreal forests, peatlands, and wetlands, which sequester massive amounts of carbon. The dams themselves emit methane and CO2 when lands are flooded and reservoirs are lowered and raised during operations. Rivers themselves naturally regulate an increasingly volatile global carbon cycle by transporting organic material from land to sea, where it settles on the ocean floor. This settling draws an estimated 200 million tons of carbon out of the air each year. Canadian dams are some of the worst in terms of the volume of organic material that is trapped behind the dams, which prevents this material from getting into the ocean and sequestering carbon. In Canada, the amount of energy produced per acre of flooded land by megadams is among the lowest in the world. In other words, these dams consume the most land per megawatt. The Canadian hydropower industry, a state-owned monopoly, continues to employ divisive strategies to undermine community cohesion in order to build more dams and to profit from the water flowing in some of the planet's last remaining wild rivers. This is extreme energy extraction. Canadian hydropower corporations, again, the state-owned monopolies, are some of the dirtiest corporations on the planet. This is the antithesis of a climate solution. And for Massachusetts, it's a climate injustice for us to put the burden of our green energy plan on the frontline communities in Canada and to destroy rivers in the process. So now I'd like to turn it over to Elder Mukash, and I believe that Gwen was going to do an introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Meg. So Matthew Mukash, EU Wisdom Keeper, is an elder born in 1951 on the land in EU Itchi, the traditional Cree territory in northern Quebec. He is known for his extensive work to advance Cree rights, promoting and enhancing Cree self-government and self-determination in the social, cultural, and economic and political aspects of Cree society. So Matthew, I would like to pass over the presentation to you.
Thank you, thank you. Wajah, this is hello in my language. I speak to you from my community in northern Quebec on the east coast of Hudson Bay. I'm honored to have been invited to speak in this event. The first thing that I want to say is, you know, is with regards to what's happening in the world today with the pandemic, our elders are telling us that we have to focus on this because it's ultimately about the well-being of the earth and all creation. They say the cure cannot be simply in the form of medicine. It must be combined with a collective will, goodwill, humanity's will to find a new way of living with the earth. Or they say we will perish in no time. So this is something that I want to first say, because ultimately there's something bigger than what we see today. More will come. The worst is yet to come, as they say. So I was asked to tell a little story about our trip down to New York in 1990 to protest the damming of our river, the Great Will River, which flows into the Hudson Bay. First of all, it was in 1971 that the government of Quebec announced the project of the century, they call it the James Bay Project, and it had three phases. One of the phases involved the damming of our river, and that was announced in 1980, in the early 80s by Quebec. And at that time, they had not, both Canada and Quebec did not live up to their obligations under the treaty that was signed in 1975 with both levels of government. They had not implemented the treaty. The promises made under the treaty were broken, as we say. So when the Cree Nation came together and there was a decision made to oppose all development in our territory, in our traditional territory. And we launched an international campaign to create awareness on what was happening in the north, on our land, and what the plan was to dam our rivers so that the energy can be sent, the electricity can be sold to the state of New York and also the New England states. The idea was to kill the market for those states, to kill the market for electricity. So we went on, we built a canoe, it was half kayak and half regular canoe. It represented the unity of both the Inuit and the Cree in this fight to save the river. So we went down to New York with the help of many people. We had a couple of gentlemen from Massachusetts that came up to help us out. We made alliances with environmental groups such as Greenpeace, the Sierra Club, and many others along the way. And the idea was to arrive in New York City on April 22nd, 1990, Earth Day 1990, which we did. We arrived at Battery Park with the greeting of the leadership of New York City. There was, I don't know how many members of the mainstream media, the big television stations and all of that were there to film the arrival of the Odiak at Battery Park. And then later that day, the ODA was brought to Times Square in New York City, where it was displayed. And our leadership was given the opportunity to address a crowd of about 10,000 people at Times Square. And all of that was televised. And this is how we created the awareness on what was happening, back home, and how the project was going to impact not only our area, but also where the corridors of the transmission lines going into the states of New York and New England states. And people were now aware of that, and we had a lot of people standing with us on that campaign. So in the end, the governor of New York, the state of New York, Mario Cuomo, decided to withdraw his signature from an agreement, power purchase agreement in the amount of $17 billion from Quebec. So that was done. He canceled that agreement, and that forced Quebec to shelve. The word that they used was to shelve the project indefinitely. Today, our river still runs free as it has since the beginning of time, nourishing life along its course and all of that. And we plan to keep it that way. And, at this time, I want to thank the people of New York. I understand that we read in the newspaper in July 2019 that the New York City administration's requirement now is that Indigenous peoples be consulted before entering into a power deal with Hydro-Quebec. So we're very happy about that. And as we speak, we have developed a better relationship with Quebec. We also work with Hydro-Quebec on some levels. And here in our community, we have, because we're isolated, because we're not connected to the power grid, the electricity is generated with a diesel power plant. We're working on a project with Hydro-Quebec to develop a wind component to the power plant here. So that project will be owned by the community of Wamakstu. And along with the Inuit, we have developed a corporation that will represent the joint partnership between the Crees and the Inuit. So this is where we are in our community. But at a bigger level, we have made a commitment to help the world find solutions to restore balance and harmony in the world. As the elders say, just look what science is telling us today, about the human body. In the human body, there are trillions of particles that are designed to make sure that there is balance within this complex computer as the human body. Each group has a specific instructions on what they're supposed to do, and they know their role. When there is a disagreement within the structure, there is an imbalance. We feel pain, the human body feels pain, and then it reacts to it, and then it heals itself. In the process, it kills all of the bad bacteria that started the discomfort in the first place. And they say that the elders tell us that the earth is a living being, and she's starting to heal herself. That's going to eradicate the bacteria, which is us, eventually, if we don't stop what it is that we're doing to destroy the earth, to create more wounds and contaminate the air, the water that is essential for life, not only for our life, but for the life of all beings in nature. So this is where we are now. We want to We have delivered a message to the world a couple of weeks ago. It's going viral out there, and we're getting a lot of feedback, good feedback through emails and through Facebook. So we're very happy about that, and we hope that all of us together, we can make a difference to restore, to help restore balance and harmony and world peace. Regrets, thank you.
Thank you so much, Matthew. That was wonderful. So now I'm going to pass over the presentation to Amy Norman, who is a Labrador land protector. She is active in the fight against megadams on the Mistachipu Churchill Grand River. Norman has been arrested and has faced criminal charges for resisting the Muskrat Falls megadam. In 2019, she petitioned under the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People to try to stop the methylmercury poisoning of traditional foods and cultural genocide caused by megadams. So Amy, the presentation is yours, and I'll start sharing your PowerPoint.
Hi, Celia. There we go. So my name is Amy Norman. I'm an Inuk woman born and raised in Happy Valley, Goose Bay, Labrador. And I'm just going to give a quick overview of kind of where I am, what I've been up to, and what the other side of these transition corridors kind of looks like, what it's like on our end. So there we go. Maybe not.
I can click through for if you need.
Sure. Okay, so that's me on one of the days that I was arrested in Ottawa. Basically, yeah, like I said, I'm from Labrador, which is you know, east of Quebec. You saw the map earlier. I've been with the Labrador Land Protectors since 2016. This is kind of like the boiling point of the resistance to the Muskrat Falls Dam. And this dam is about 30 kilometers upstream from where I am and where I grew up and where my family has always lived. My main focus is on how the Muskrat Falls Dam and all hydro dams really, how they impact Indigenous peoples and their impact on Indigenous rights. And specifically because me and my family are Inuit, how they affect our Inuit culture and way of life. So let's do the next slide. One of the main issues with these mega dams, and the reason that I really got involved with the Muskrat Falls resistance, is because of methylmercury. Basically, these large mega dams cause methylmercury contamination. Methylmercury is a harmful neurotoxin, and it can cause all kinds of horrible issues like developmental disorders, you know, numbness and tingling in your hands and your feet, memory issues, hearing speech problems, like all kinds of things. So when the vegetation that's in the reservoir of these large dams is submerged in water, it changes from the naturally occurring mercury state into this methylized version called methylmercury, and that's what is harmful. And we can go to the next slide. And it's harmful because it builds up in fat and then it works its way up our food web. So you can see here in this little diagram, you know, it starts in the water, it goes up the plankton, the smaller fish, the larger fish, you know, as the seals eat these fish, and we eat the seals because that's who we are. We are seal people as Inuit. And our traditional diet is very rich in fat. And because of that fact, because of how much, you know, fat is in our diet and the way that methylmercury bioaccumulates in fat, it means that methylmercury poisoning is way, it disproportionately impacts Inuit compared to, you know, other cultures, like all you know, Indigenous peoples, but especially Inuit because of our relationship to these fatty kind of foods. So this is one of the main reasons why I got involved. As you can see, you know, me and my nephew here fishing last year. I was out fishing this weekend. You know, we still rely on hunting and fishing and harvesting. And our traditional diet is one of the only sources of healthy food up here in the north. You know, there's so much food insecurity. You know, food up here is very expensive. We have to rely on these sources of food. And when they're contaminated because of these megadams in our backyard, you know, that's not only severing our only links to our traditional diet, but that's also our links to our culture, because, you know, it's not just food on our plate. It also, you know, it nourishes the mind and the body and the spirit. It's who we are. So my message is, if your state is purchasing hydropower from Canada, you are complicit in what is happening, you know, to my people and what's happening on the other end of these transmission lines. So I think it's really important to get the message out about, you know, what's going on the other end. I've been charged and arrested twice. There's been over 70 of us in our small community that's been charged and arrested. They've sent elders to prison, maximum security prison. They've arrested women in the middle of the night violently. You know, there's a lot of over-policing of Indigenous land protectors happening here. And we're still fundraising for our legal fees. So you can see the website there if you'd like to donate to help our legal fundraising. But this is just, you know, one of the many issues. You can change slides. You know, there's a bunch more other impacts and other issues that we really struggle with these dams in our backyard. You know, it's not just the methylmercury poisoning. There's a lot of issues around dam safety, and you know, you can see basically the whole list there. But we've had journalists arrested, so there's a lot of press freedom organizations that are getting involved with the Muskrat Falls kind of resistance movement. There's you know, the issues around Indigenous rights and the United Nations Declaration around Indigenous peoples. There's so many problems with these dams, and it's not unique to Labrador. This is not unique to Muskrat Falls. You'll find issues of dam safety and issues of violating Indigenous rights all across Canada, all across the United States, all across the world. Anywhere where there's a mega dam, this is the kind of thing that happens. So that's why, you know, the Labrador Land Protectors with the North American Megadam Resistance Alliance and other organizations, we're trying to come together to speak about, you know, what's happening individually in all of our communities, but also to highlight the pattern, to show what's going on worldwide when it comes to these dams, and why, you know, we can no longer accept these greenwashing lies that hydro is somehow this clean energy when it's really, really not. So just some quick links. It's to share. We're on Facebook and Twitter, the Labrador Land Protectors. Although our Twitter page is suspended right now, so I don't really know what's going on with that. But yeah, some websites so you can learn more, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A. But that was just my kind of brief overview of some of the strong issues around, you know, the dam that's in my backyard and how it kind of relates to all hydropower.
Great. Thank you so much, Amy, for sharing. And now we're going to pass it over to Sandy Howard, who is the director of Say No to NECEC, a grassroots nonprofit organization that's focused on environmental and educational advocacy. Say No to NECEC is opposed to large-scale industrial development in Western Maine, specifically Central Maine Power's New England Clean Energy Connect proposal to build a 145-mile transmission line from Quebec-Maine border to Lewiston. So wonderful. Dr. Howard is a native of Maine and a registered Maine guide of 23 years, and is also a professor of music at Keene State College. So Sandy, I would like to pass it over to you.
Well, thank you. And it's been amazing to hear the testimonies ahead of me. So thank you so much for allowing me to join this conversation today. So we've heard a lot about the horrible impacts of these megadams on the land, water, and on Indigenous communities in Canada. And now I'd like to discuss some more of the devastating aspects of the CMP corridor that it would have in Maine. So Central Maine Power, which is owned by Avangrid and Spanish parent company Iberdrola, submitted a proposal called the New England Clean Energy Connect in response to the state of Massachusetts 83D call for proposals to help them meet their energy goals. Over 40 proposals were submitted. Northern Pass in New Hampshire was the first choice, and it underwent a decade of review, appeal, and finally defeat. So CMP's project, which is more commonly called the corridor, is the second choice project for Massachusetts. Simply put, the CMP corridor is a horrible idea for Maine. An overwhelming majority of Mainers oppose this destructive and for-profit project. This is a 145-mile-long corridor that would cut Maine in half. It would start at the Maine-Quebec border, run through a globally significant boreal forest that has no large-scale infrastructure. Then it would connect to an existing transmission corridor in West Forks and widen 92 additional miles of existing corridor to Lewiston, Maine. Then the power, the 1,200 megawatts of power, would go directly to the ISO New England grid. So imagine a 2,000-acre permanent clear-cut in Western Maine with a 300-foot wide corridor blazing a path as wide as the New Jersey Turnpike through one of the last intact and globally significant forests. The CMP corridor would also result in irreversible destruction of Maine's environment. It would cross wetlands and Maine state heritage waterways. It would have a detrimental impact on critical wildlife habitat, including deer wintering yards and the last stronghold for native brook trout in the country. It would cross the Appalachian National Scenic Trail in 3 places and ruin scenic views along the federally recognized and award-winning Old Canada Road Scenic Byway. CMP wants us to believe that this project will help reduce global greenhouse gas emissions, and that is simply not true. This project is not about climate change. It's about CMP and Hydro-Quebec making a profit while destroying the environment. You've already heard how it's caused massive destruction in Canada with megadam flooding and cultural genocide to First Nation communities. A CMP spokesperson, John Carroll, stated in March 2019 that they, quote, cannot guarantee this project will have any impact on climate change, end quote. CMP and Hydro-Quebec have spent nearly $10 million since last fall to try to gain support for this project. They spent more money on 30 lobbyists in Augusta, Maine's capital, than it would have cost to conduct a comprehensive climate study for this project. So what are they afraid of? And at the Maine Department of Environmental Protection, CMP's lawyer submitted a letter into the official record saying that the purpose and the need of the CMP corridor is not about addressing climate change. Its purpose is to deliver 1,200 megawatts of power from Quebec to benefit Massachusetts ratepayers. CMP has an inconsistent narrative, which is just another example of why the public cannot trust CMP's statements about this project. Right now, carbon sequestration plays a huge factor in combating climate change, and we don't need a 2,000-acre permanent clear-cut through Maine, nor do we need to support further creation of massive dam impounds, increasing methylmercury levels in waters in North America. It's clear that the CMP corridor will not help us fight climate change. It's just about CMP making $60 million a year while Maine's environment's torn apart. So let's talk about job loss in Maine. There would be an overall net job loss if this project were to go through, because there are permanent jobs now in the biomass and related wood forest products industries and recreational tourism in Western Maine. Those jobs would be lost. If the CMP corridor is approved, it would result in only 38 jobs after the construction of the corridor. So those numbers don't add up. And since this is a high voltage direct current line, This corridor would prevent expansion of true renewable energy produced right here in Maine. Maine does not deserve to be an extension cord from Quebec to Massachusetts. Let's talk about CMP's credibility. According to JD Power, CMP went from ranked first to last place in residential customer satisfaction. The CMP corridor will not help with power reliability or keep the lights on. Instead, the corridor proves to be a distraction for CMP. This is a company that cannot adequately serve Maine ratepayers, and it's also involved in a number of scandals for overbilling and fraud. And now CMP wants to further shift their priority away from Maine ratepayers to serve others in Massachusetts. Mainers do not trust CMP with this project, and we don't want this destructive project. Here's an update about the permitting process. So permits are still being reviewed by the Maine Department of Environmental Protection, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Department of Energy, the presidential permit, which is still accepting public comments. We will likely see appeals at these approval agencies from either CMP or opposition groups, which will further delay this project. So recently in the Maine media, we've been seeing press releases from CMP about wanting to move ahead with contracts. They are trying to catch up on their project timeline because they're behind. Now, the shareholders recently had a call with the stock analysts, and they were talking about this huge financial risk that is taking place if these contracts are being signed into, because we have an upcoming referendum in November about the corridor. So for nearly 2 years, the people of Maine have said that they want a voice to stop the CMP corridor. 3/4 of Mainers oppose the project, and that's why we've seen our grassroots members leverage 25 towns to rescind support and oppose the project. This has been a uniquely unifying issue across all regions of the state, involving people of all ages and representing the entire political spectrum. Mainers don't want the CMP corridor. And that's why we collected over 66,000 verified signatures during Maine's 3 coldest months, so we can leverage a statewide vote to defeat the corridor once and for all. Essentially, Mainers will be asked if they want to revoke the PUC permit given to Central Maine Power to build the project. CMP is looking to make a profit only to destroy Maine's and Quebec's environment. The corridor would be a 145-mile permanent scar through Maine. It would ruin Western Maine's scenic character, iconic brand, our way of life, and in no way will the CMP corridor help us in our effort to combat global climate change. I hope that you will join the Say No to NECEC grassroots effort, learn about more of the negative impacts to the corridor. You can find us on Facebook or contact us at stopnecec@gmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Sandy and to all of our presenters thus far. We're going to open it up to a question and answer portion now. So if anybody has any questions that they would like to ask to Meg, Matthew, Amy, or Sandy, the floor is yours, and you're able to either ask it in the chat utilizing the chat feature, or you can unmute your microphone and ask that way.
Hi, I actually had a question just for all the presenters. If anyone mentioned any links, is it possible to put that in the chat so that we can view it, after this closes? Because it's hard to click the links that are in, presentations.
Absolutely, yes. And at the end of this, I'm going to be sending out in the chat a sign-in sheet that everybody can fill out, and then I'll send a follow-up email with the resources that were mentioned in this presentation, and then also some additional resources as well.
Can I just make a request? This is Ellen down in Massachusetts. I'm only on phone. I don't have any other means to be on. So if people could just say their names or something like that, it would be really helpful, or where you're from, that kind of thing.
When they're speaking, absolutely.
And also if I could just reach out to you offline and get this information, that would be helpful too.
Absolutely, yes. And this is Gwen from Sunrise Weather. talking, and anybody who has a similar request and would like, isn't able to fill out the sign-in form but would still like information, you can email sunriseworcester@gmail.com and then just indicate your name and what presentation you were at, and then we can follow up with you afterwards with additional resources. Does anybody else have any other questions?
This is Ellen again. Does anybody else have a question? I do if you don't.
Yeah, go ahead. The floor is yours.
So this project really so deeply touches my heart. I lived in Quebec for a time. I went to college in Lewiston, Maine, and I live in Massachusetts. So I have spoken to some of my electeds on this, and yet I haven't ever felt like there was enough of a crowd to come with me into the State House. I'm wondering where it sits right now. You know, where is Charlie Baker on this? Because, you know, he's totally the elephant in the room, and unfortunately he's doing a decent enough job with the COVID thing that people are going to love him. Where is the AG, Maura Healey of Massachusetts, who is a really strong climate champion? And you know, I also used to live in New Hampshire, so, you know, New Hampshire's good loss is Maine and Quebec's sad reality and the Cree and Inuit. So, so I'll just leave that there, and then whoever can address some of those issues and what all people are doing in Massachusetts to, you know, end this.
So this is Meg Sheehan. I'll take a stab at that question if it's okay with everyone.
Yep.
Unfortunately, the contract between NECAC, Hydro-Quebec, and the distributors has been signed. It went through the Department of Public Utilities regulatory process, and it was approved in July of 2019. The Attorney General did object, but not on the grounds of the source of the power or any impacts on the climate or anything. It was really more about the process. That is now under appeal to the state Supreme Judicial Court. But we have concluded as a campaign that there aren't a lot of political openings at this point. What we really need to do is change the Energy Diversity Act, and it would be great if anybody wanted to have a conversation about this. We can talk about a strategy around legislation, and I can reach out to you, Ellen, and anyone else. Contact me directly, and we can follow up on that and brainstorm any other ideas.
Thank you, Meg.
So in short, that there aren't any fronts in Massachusetts that we've been able to uncover politically to stop this particular project.
I see two people raising their hands. I'm a bit new to that feature, I will admit, but Annie W., if you'd like to unmute yourself, you can feel free to ask your question. I've unmuted you, Annie. I'm not sure that was, maybe that was a mistake with raising the hand. Heidi, do you have a question?
Yeah, yes, I do. I would like to know that when I've been around this since 1991, and I was blessed to meet Matthew at the Ban the Dam Jam for James Bay in New York City in 1991. It was a big series of concerts, but one of the things that they did was they brought in an energy group called the Goodman Group based in Massachusetts, and they were able to do an energy audit that looked at all the different possible sources of electricity for the state, or for the state of New York, and I think also for Massachusetts. And what they were able to do was to show that this wasn't needed. And I'm wondering if we can bring in that kind of resource right now to be able to help bring, and to bring a whole unity to all of us working to stop this, so that people understand that this power is not necessary, and that there are other alternatives to offer, so that people don't have to become dependent on the hydro. And I'd also like to see that the Cree are recognized in possibly a massive ad campaign that could help get people aligned and draw interest in on the subject, so that people know that it's beyond beyond just these numbers, that there are lives at stake, and that basically if we don't say anything, more rivers are going to be drowned. And I'd like to know what Matthew thinks about that too, if he's still listening.
Hello. Yeah, I'm listening, Heidi. Yes, well, first of all, I'm not involved in the political aspect of our nation. I've done that over 30 years, and I resigned from public office in 2009. I'm not fully aware of where the Grand Council is in their dealings with Hydro-Quebec at that level, where it involves additional projects, hydro projects in our territory. Because when I was leading my nation as the Grand Chief from 2005 to 2009, we were told that there were going to be no more mega projects in our territory, which probably means that there were going to be other projects elsewhere in Quebec. And I understand that there are projects ongoing on the north shore of Quebec. Probably that's where the attention should be, to get those people that are affected there to come forward, like we did in the 90s, lobbying the decision makers, that make a difference, like Governor Mario Cuomo did on our behalf in the 90s. So I really can't give more advice than that, but I think it's very important to involve the indigenous peoples whose lands are being affected by hydro projects. That would be my advice. When we went down to your area in Massachusetts and New York State and Vermont, we told the people, it's very important if you have compassion for life in nature, the animals and the marine life and all that, remember that every time you turn on your light switch, you're affecting that life in the north. So this is the principle that we used to be able to win the hearts of people in the United States, because when we left our community in 1990 to go down to New York City, our elders told us, you will get support of the people if you can capture them in their hearts, because every human being has a side that's open, that there's a light there. If you can hit them there in their hearts, they will side with you. So this is what happened. We had that tremendous support to do away with this project, the Great War River Project. That's all I got to say, Hattie.
Sorry, I was just talking and I was muted. It looks like we have time for about one more question before we hop on to ending logistics. So I'm just going to read out Pete's question from the chat. So he said, I think a big challenge here in Vermont is the overriding assumption that electrifying everything is the answer to climate change, when clearly that is not the case. I would be curious to know how the presenters and others are working to challenge that narrative.
This is Meg. I will try to take a stab at that as well. Our alliance is very concerned about that issue, and I know a lot of folks who would otherwise be considered allies are promoting the electrification of everything. We're talking about it, and I welcome input on more strategies on how to address that issue. Thanks, Pete.
All right, so I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen for two last slides. So there have been a lot of links that have been passed around in the chat, but these were two ones that we wanted to highlight. So if you would like to consider donating to either the Labrador Land Protectors Legal Fund or the Megadams Fund, the links are found on this slide here. And right in just a minute, I am going to put a link to the sign-in form for the Zoom, in the Zoom chat for this presentation. So let me just locate the chat. All right, so that should be there for everybody to fill out. And after you fill that out, we'll get back to you probably early next week with some more resources about how to get involved with resisting Canadian hydropower. So thank you all deep thanks to all of our presenters for coming on today and sharing their wisdom and their knowledge and their fight for justice with all of us. I think I can speak for everybody when I say that your stories really resonated with us, and I feel really empowered to take action, and we appreciate you providing so many different avenues for us to collectively come together and do something about this. So thank you again. We will be in touch, and we hope to see you all at our upcoming Earth Day events. We have one tonight from 7 to 8 about environmental justice. And then we have events for the rest of the week on Thursday and Friday as well. And you can find more information about that on our Facebook page at facebook.com/sunriseworcester. Or if you go on earthdaylive2020.org, they actually have 72 hours worth of live streaming events happening right now, all about climate justice and things that we can be doing to come together and take care of our Earth. So feel free to check them out, and you can find us under local live streams. So thank you to everybody. It was wonderful to connect, and we will be in contact soon.
Goodbye, all.
Goodbye.
Everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job, everyone.
I see on your faces. Bye, Amy. Bye.
Bye. Stay safe. Stay healthy.
Good job, Gwen.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you. Excellent, Gwen. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julian.
Gwen and Julian, this is Ellen. I'm going to send you guys an email to connect me up with everybody.
Okay, that sounds great. Yep, sunriseworcester@gmail.com.
Thanks.
sunrisemovement@gmail.com.
Sunrise Worcester. I can. It's so sunrise and then WORCESTER@gmail.com.
Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
No problem. Thank you.